Friday morning is here. You see, I have Coach Sean with me. We'll have more guests coming in just a little bit. Fear not, but what a great way to start off Friday. What a great way to look forward to the weekend. Coach Sean, how you doing?
Good, man. A little tired, a little fatigued from other jobs, but hey, man, I'm here talking football with Ty the Great. All the people in the chat, I can't ask for nothing better.
Man, so excited for you to be here. Zachary, thank you for being here, saying good morning, Ty. Good morning to you, Zachary. Brandon saying, I hope Coach Sean is here today. Like I told you, Brandon, you'll be very happy. Everyone low-key sleeping on Kalen DeBoer and Bama, and I can't wait till we put belt to ass in the season, starting with the win over UGA. That's going to be a great game. I'm telling everybody, circle that game, especially if you're into the X's and O's of football. I don't think that there are three better games all season in terms of what you are going to get in terms of X's and O's. Joseph saying, good morning, fellas. Good morning, Joseph. Happy you're here. Ben G, happy you're here. He says, I love how Bama fans continue to act like everyone is sleeping on them. They're ranked top 10 and have the fourth best odds of winning the SEC. I think that's a fan thing, Ben G. I've seen plenty of Texas fans, even though a lot of people put them as the number 2 team in the SEC, that, we're being slept on by everybody. So that's how you feel about being ranked 4th, and I see it from the team that's ranked 2nd, right? Like, that's just a fan behavior. I wouldn't let it get you so riled up. But we are going to talk about the coach rankings because I do vehemently disagree with some of those. All right, do vehemently disagree with some of those. So we're going to jump into that. Stephen G saying, good morning, Ty and Coach. PG saying, y'all going to talk on how Oregon is buying a championship. Yeah, we can talk about that for sure, PG. That can definitely be a conversation today. The one thing I will say, though, is that everybody's playing the NIL game. They just have a lot of resources, right? Like, they just have supreme resources, so it just looks different. Yo, Ty, and this is Coach Sean Anthony and Smitty. I don't know who Smitty is, but this is Coach Sean Anthony. No hope on landing a 5-star over Oregon now? I wouldn't say that. Bama got Dejoun Lee over him. Keelan Russell. Hopefully they keep him. But, Coach Sean, I wanted to start with this conversation right here. CBS Sports released a power rankings the other day of the top coaches in the SEC. And I just had it pulled up, and obviously I fat-fingered, and now I don't have it pulled up. So let me get to this again. Here we go. So we have the SEC head coach power rankings via CBS Sports. This is a tweet from On3. 1 is Kirby Smart. Any surprise there, Coach?
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I'm like you. I can't. I don't imagine who in the world, not even just SEC, like if this was college football coaching rankings, I don't know who in the world you would put over Kirby Smart. The guy's the number 1 coach with Nick Saban retiring, and I just think that that's pretty easy to argue. Number 2, Brian Kelly. Now, Coach, I'm interested in hearing your take on this because Brian Kelly is a hell of a coach, right? And I know every time I say that, I get pushback in the comments. And I understand that pushback because Notre Dame was a team that didn't have a conference. He would get to the national championship. He wouldn't win a national championship. My argument there is that it's very hard to win, like incredibly difficult just to win a college football playoff game. And if it's incredibly difficult to just win a playoff game, it's increasingly more difficult to win a national championship. So while I do agree that national championships are a metric, I don't know that that's the most apt metric to go off of. And considering that nobody else on this list has a natty as a head coach, what are you going to do? So what do you think about Brian Kelly being number 2? It's tough.
If I'll say this, if the criteria is based off what you've done of late in the SEC, okay, right? I mean, the guy did go to the SEC championship. Do I think he's the second best coach in the league? No, I don't. I do not at all. But I can see where someone who's saying, okay, we got to give Brian some points because he came into the SEC. This is his third year, fourth year at LSU. The guy's already taken his team to the national championship. To the SEC championship. He's done more than a lot of coaches who've been here a long time. I can understand it from that standpoint if that's your criteria. But if you're saying the best coaches in the SEC, how do you put him over Kalen DeBoer? I don't know. Kalen DeBoer went to the national championship with Washington, was better and better and better every year with less talent, at a school that a lot of coaches have not fared well at, right? Or in a conference that hadn't fared very well to get to the national championship game and from the Pac-12. So if it's overall best coaches, I would definitely put Kalen DeBoer ahead of him. I think Kalen DeBoer's been more successful in a shorter time. Sure, Brian went to the playoffs. We get that national championship against Alabama years ago at another school. But if you're giving Brian credit for what he done in Notre Dame, then you got to give Kalen DeBoer credit for what he done at Washington. If you're saying Brian deserves to be ahead of Kalen because of what Brian has done in the SEC, okay, well then don't name your list best coaches. Name your list best returning coaches in the SEC, right? So it's kind of fugazi. These lists, man, I don't try to get it's same as the best hip hop artist of all time. These lists are very one-sided, man. I don't really feed too much into it. If you're saying Brian Kelly is one of the best returning coaches in the SEC, number two, cool. I got you. I'm with you. But if you're saying best coaches in the SEC right now who are there overall, you got to put Kalen DeBoer ahead of this guy, in my opinion.
See, this is where it gets interesting, Coach. Because when we go to number 3, I was the same as you in terms of being like, okay, when I first looked at this, Kirby, cool. I didn't have a second thought about Kirby. As big of a KD fan as I am, Kirby is Kirby, right? Like, back-to-back national championships, one regular season loss, and how many years? The NFL draft production speaks for itself. Consistent top 5 recruiting classes. There's no way to argue against him right now. And especially with Nick stepping out. Like, there is no way to argue against him. So I was like, okay, cool. Naturally. So, and then Ben G, this is where the logic falls, though. Why would you put KD over BK? What he did was at UW last season, not in the SEC. Well, this is head coach power rankings. This isn't what you did in the SEC rankings. And then furthermore, to argue that point, number 3 is Steve Sarkeesian, who also hasn't coached a game in the SEC as a head coach. So that automatically falls by the wayside, right? Like if it's what you did in the SEC last year, he was in the Big 12. Sure, he played Alabama week 2. You got the win. But Kalen DeBoer beat you in the playoffs. Kalen DeBoer beat you the year before in the bowl game. So if we're arguing head-to-head, sure, Texas may have beaten an SEC team, but then that team that beat an SEC team also lost to Kalen DeBoer twice. So this is where I got confused. I was like, okay, so if we're doing it based on SEC rankings, I could understand Brian Kelly being ranked second. But the point where you put Steve Sarkeesian over Kalen DeBoer, obviously that's not the parameters. No, you're good, Benji. You're good. Don't get me wrong. I'd put Brian Kelly top 4. And
if it's returning coaches to the SEC, I ain't got no problem putting them at 2 right now. I don't have no problem with that.
If it's returning, I agree. But I'm not going to lie to you, Coach Sean. If I'm looking at this top 4, because we're already at 4, you have Kirby 1, Brian Kelly 2, Steve Sarkeesian 3, Kalen DeBoer 4. Ben, I am about to make you very happy. As things currently trend, who do you take? Because personally, I'd have Kirby 1. I'd have Kalen DeBoer 2. And I know that's going to raise eyebrows. I agree Brian Kelly's a really good coach. And I think he gets a lot of flack for the antics. Right? Yeah. Like, I think it's very easy to kind of meme Brian Kelly, but if we're really being as objective as possible, the dude can coach.
I got respect for Brian Kelly. I do.
But here's my question, Coach Sean. Who do you rank ahead of who? Because I think, would you agree that you would put Kirby obviously 1, Kalen DeBoer 2, if we were doing this list?
Yes, I would put
Okay.
Kalen DeBoer too if it's an overall coaches, um, not just returning coaches to the SEC. If you're saying best coaches, or what was the list? What was the title of the list?
Head coach power rankings.
Head coaching power rankings. If you're going to give Brian Kelly credit for taking Notre Dame to the Natty, then you have to give Kalen DeBoer for taking Washington to the Natty, right? A smaller brand, right? In a smaller market, not as far as the coast he's on, but Notre Dame is a huge, huge, huge draw, right? We understand the academic requirements, but to take Washington and be successful like he did with those guys and get better, better, better every year he's there. If you're going to give Brian Kelly credit for that, if you're going to say, well, he took Notre Dame to the Natty, okay, cool. Brian took Washington, Kalen took Washington to the Natty, right? So if you're saying Brian is one of the best returning coaches to the SEC, cool. But just like you said, Ty, if it's an overall power rating, you can't put him in front of Kalen DeBoer, in my opinion.
And Anthony has an interesting comment here. He says, because Sark has experience coaching in the SEC as a coordinator, I understand head coach and coordinator are two different positions, but he still has experience coaching in the conference. I think that's a very well-placed comment, Anthony. And had they never played each other, I would be like, okay, yeah, I do give him that experience. But at the point where you have the two head-to-heads, and if we actually look, Washington and TCU are the only teams in the college football playoff era to win a playoff game without satisfying the blue chip ratio, meaning over 50% of your roster is comprised of blue chips. Only two teams have done it. That's TCU and that's Washington, right? Now, last year, and I'm not saying that DeBoer just like that was a great game last year. Texas and Washington. I mean, Texas nearly came back and won that darn thing, right? So my argument is not Sark bad. I think if you've been a part of this channel, you know I am a big time believer in Steve Sarkeesian. Maybe more so than most fans outside of Texas.
Yeah.
But this is where I have my biggest question. Do you put Brian Kelly over Sark? And here's the thing, because I know there will be people that say, hey, look at what Sark did at Washington. Look at what Sark did at USC. And I'm not telling you to forget that. I'm not. But what I am going to pose right now is that when I look at Sark, it's not almost two chapters. When I look at Sark, it's almost two books. You have the book of Steve Sarkeesian at UW, at USC, and then he had his personal troubles. And then you have the book of Steve Sarkeesian after he had faced those, came to Alabama, and then moved on. So, Coach, where do you rank between BK and Sark?
For me, man, I would have to put, and I'll tell you why. I would put Sark ahead, and I'll tell you why. I've never seen Sark since he's been at Texas have a team that just looked flat out bad. Even when Sark first got there, when the talent gap wasn't anywhere near what he has right now, you could definitely tell he was suffering in the trenches, right? It didn't expose his head a lot in the Big 12, right? He lost some games. We all know that. But I've never seen his teams just look flat out awful. Never, right? He lost a lot of close games as well. Every year Sark has been at Texas, they've gotten better and better and better. When I look at Brian Kelly, you came in, you had a plethora of talent, did your thing your first year. But I watched your defense the next year suck. Like you look terrible. Like that didn't even look like an SEC defense at all. The next year after that, last year, your defense sucked, right? So I've seen you go from here back to here and sort of stay there. I watched Sark get better and better and better. I watched Kalen DeBoer get better and better and better every year they was there. I hadn't seen that from Brian Kelly. I seen you come in your first year and have some success, right? After that, you hadn't done as well. Any year you've been there, it's Ed Orgeron-ish, if you ask me. Look at it. Your recruiting classes aren't no better than they was when Ed Orgeron was there. Your play on the field outside of your first year in the SEC Hadn't been no better than when Ed Ogeron was there. So I've watched you sort of do the same thing, right? You had some great success your first year, beat Alabama, done your thing, all of that. What have you done since then? Yeah, what 9-3? You know what was LSU 9-3, 8-4?
No, yeah, I
Ed
think they were 9-3.
Ogeronish. I watched Sark start from here at the bottom and get better the next year, better the next year, better the next year. Recruiting wise, better, better, better. And now they're ready. I watched, so that's what I can say. So I would definitely put Sark above Brian Kelly for right now.
This is the most interesting conversation, right? When we look at the top four, in my opinion, is where do we put Brian Kelly versus Steve Sarkeesian? Because I don't think there's a wrong answer. Ben G, the Texas fan, says he would put BK over Steve Sarkeesian as of right now, and I can respect that.
But why? I want to know why. I would love to know why. What's your logic for putting Brian Kelly above Sark right now?
I think it would probably be like history.
So we're taking other schools into context?
I would imagine so, right?
Okay.
I think it'd probably be just like the history of it. Sark just got his first 10 win season. And that's fair, Boomer. But like I said, I think when we look at Steve Sarkeesian, we have Steve Sarkeesian in book 1 and then Steve Sarkeesian in book 2.
I would say that Brian Kelly, I'm sorry, Ty.
Go ahead.
I think Brian, how many 10-win seasons does Brian have at LSU? One? His first? I don't think they won 10 games last year. Like, how many 10-game seasons does he have at LSU? That I know that first year. Boom. So he just got his 10-win. Now, if you're taking other schools into effect, my recollections aren't that far. I like to know what you've done while you've been at your namesake school. What have you done since you've been there? I would argue that Sark has been more effective at Texas than Brian Kelly has been at LSU. Sark won the Big 12. My man hadn't won the SEC. I would argue that Steve Sarkeesian has been more effective at Texas, recruiting wise and on the field, than Brian Kelly has at LSU. Now, if we're stepping outside of those namesake schools, then okay, I understand your argument.
I think we'd have to step outside of those namesake schools, Coach, just because of the fact that in order to put Kalen DeBoer number 2, we have to include what he did at Washington.
Okay.
Gotcha. Right? And that was taking them. So this is why I said this is a super interesting conversation. But I'm very interested whenever Jay gets in here and Jake gets in here to hear what they say. Now, Benji earlier said that he would put Lane Kiffin over Sark and DeBoer. So let's pretend for this that we're going 1 Kirby, 2 DeBoer, 3 Brian Kelly, 4 Steve Sarkeesian. I would have 5 Lane Kiffin. Right? I would have 5 Lane Kiffin. And Benji, I personally wouldn't take Lane Kiffin over either DeBoer or Steve Sarkeesian, and I'm going to tell you why in a few ways right now. One, I think Lane is an offensive genius, but I also think Lane is a little bit of a loose cannon. I think Steve Sarkeesian is the more buttoned up version of Sark. Or I'm sorry, I think Steve Sarkeesian is the more buttoned up version of Lane Kiffin. I apologize. Lane is one of those guys where it's almost like sometimes he's coaching to prove that his philosophy is going to win as opposed to coaching to like win the game. I think last year's Alabama game was a little bit of a head scratcher. After the first quarter, Alabama was really keyed in on what Ole Miss was trying to do. And they just kept trying to do it over and over and over again. So I would argue that Lane is adequately placed at 5. What do you think, Coach?
I would too. I agree with that 1,000%. Lane around that era, around that time, right? Last year was probably his best season at Ole Miss. Also, let me say this too. When I really think about it, as far as that Sark and Brian Kelly go, when you really think about it, for me, I can't take it out of the Texas and LSU comparison because Sark hadn't been a college football coach before then, as far as a head coach in years. He was in the pros, being a coordinator. Brian Kelly's been a head coach at 2 different schools of late, right? I mean, I know he's been a head coach at other schools, Grand Rapids and things, but I'm saying he's been a head coach the whole time. Sark has only been a head coach at Texas in college football here recently. Before that, he was in the pros. Before that, he was assistants at Alabama. Before that, he was, he's been all over the place. So he hadn't been a head coach in college consistently as long as Brian Kelly. When Brian Kelly was taking Notre Dame to national championships, Sark wasn't a head coach in college football. So he didn't have that opportunity. Sark was an assistant. So it's hard for me to compare what Sark done years ago at USC and Washington to what Brian done in the last few years, right? Brian, all I know is Sark has been a head coach for a shorter time of recent, but he's been more consistent at his namesake school than Brian Kelly has at his, right? That's all I'm saying, because I understand Brian has been a head coach for much longer time. So it's hard to compare those two, right? Sark was an assistant. But as far as Lane, I definitely agree. It's hard to win at Ole Miss, man. It's very, very difficult to win at Ole Miss. If you take the money aspect and the NIL aspect out of it, it's very difficult to recruit to Ole Miss. It always has been. Yeah, I would put Lane right there. I think last year, losing to Alabama, losing to Georgia, and beating everybody else, it's probably his best season, right? And I think this year will define how his future will go at Wells Fargo. I mean, excuse me, I just read a text for Wells Fargo at Ole Miss. If Ole Miss can win 9 games a year, they'll keep Lane for 30 years as long as he want to be there, right? But you know, Lane is I love Lane personally. I love Lane. I think he's an offensive genius. But Lane is kind of like what you just said. Lane is a showman, right? Um, you got to know what you're getting with Lane. Lane Lane is a gangster. You know what I'm saying? He does things the way he wants to do. He's gonna step outside the bounds. He's gonna say things and tweet things, and it's a lot of things that come along with Lane. But I love Lane Kiffin to death, and I definitely would put him at that same spot, Ty, for right now if we're talking present day.
Yeah, I'd keep him at 5. And this is a great time because we have Jay coming in here. Jay, we're at number 5 on the coaches list, and I think this is a perfect time. We're not too deep into the weeds to get your take on our top 5, right? Because and you were the one that tweeted this list out, so I'm gonna first off, everybody, Unfair Sports. I'm sure everybody's familiar, right? Jay,
shout out,
my toothbrush is still in the back, even though I've been on vacation and traveling for work for a bit. My toothbrush is still there, so we all know that I'm part of the family, right?
Exactly.
Sure.
So, before you jump in here, where can the people find all your great content for those that may not know?
If you don't know me, you can find me over at Unfair Sports here on YouTube, as well as wherever podcasts are downloaded and listened to. Just join the team over on Locked On Sooners. Every day we drop Oklahoma content, so you can check me out there as well. So thanks for having me. And then hopefully, if things seem to be going the way I think they are, we may be seeing Bleacher Report again this coming season. Cross your fingers and toes.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to be seeing Bleacher Report again this season, just based on some of the communication I've had, right? And so that's going to be awesome. Hopefully they absolutely bring that back. Boomer129 says Travis on his pod last night said someone should start a coffee company named SEC Grind. That'd be great.
Oh my God, money.
That'd be great. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
I love that idea.
I'm going to read the list as it's presented, 1 through 5. And then, Jay, I'm going to give you where we are. And we have a little bit of a debate, right, going
Conundrum?
on. Yes.
Kerfuffle?
It's a fascinating one, and I'm very interested to get your take. Now, the list as it's presented, top 5. You have Kirby number 1. There's no arguing that, right?
Nope.
Even if this was head coach power rankings and we slashed SEC, there's no arguing that. Number 2, 100%. We have Brian Kelly. Number 3, Steve Sarkeesian. Number 4, Kalen DeBoer. Now, and then 5, Lane Kiffin. I don't have a problem with 1 or 5. Okay? I think Kirby at 1 makes sense. I think Lane Kiffin at 5 makes sense. I personally, Jay, would have Kalen DeBoer at number 2, just because of what he inherited at Washington relative to what he did. And I understand the argument of like, hey, it's the Pac-12. I will give you that for the 2022 season. But in 2023, ironically, the Pac-12 was phenomenal on its deathbed.
Yeah. May have been. Right. If the bad part is that we got all the best Pac-12 ball right when they were dead. Yeah. That's the bad part. We had their best performance right before they died.
How long, Jay, would you say it's been since the Pac-12 was that good top to bottom?
Oh, gosh. It had to have been when USC was in their heyday, because back you had Oregon still doing things. Oregon State was pretty hot. Washington State had moments where they were populating up and down, or at least being a nuisance, if anything. UCLA never really gave us much, so I wouldn't really throw them in there. Or the Zonas, for the most part. They had their ups and downs, but when you had Colorado almost making it to a conference championship when they first got there, it's probably been before that realignment really happened. That's when the Pac-10 at that time was dangerous and terrifying, because they were able to keep those West Coast kids there. But now they can't.
Yeah. And so that's why if the Pac was replicated like it was in 2022, and it wasn't bad in 2022, but 2023, it seemed like everybody took a step up.
Ty, we talked about the quarterback play and the quarterbacks that were there, and
insane.
how, I mean, going from Cam Ward to DJ Uiagalelei, you had Caleb Williams. I mean, Shador actually was really good despite not being able to win because he couldn't outscore everybody by himself. He was good. Noah Fafita
was great.
We was hardcore on Arizona as the season was going on. Like, hey, no, this team's for real. And then, unfortunately, we lost them in the bowl game. But yeah, they're for real, right?
Yeah, but I don't think people and to be objective here, Jay and I were talking about Arizona on Bleacher Report from about week 3 on.
Yep.
He and I were nailing every week Washington State, Arizona. Don't miss them. And we called those. In fairness to y'all, Jay, it's easy to say, you lost to Arizona in the bowl game, lol. That Arizona team was pretty darn good. They had good defensive pieces. They had one of the best wide receiver quarterback duos in the nation last year. Fafita vastly outplayed a freshman label, right? Like, that was a damn good Arizona team. And I'll tell you what else is really good is Patriot Life coming in with the $20 saying, been a long time, just dropping by to say roll tide and hope you guys are doing well. Work and life have been busy, but I'm still around. Hey, Patriot, as I always tell you, 2 most valuable things you have in life is time and your health. And for you to spend any amount of time here with us, anytime you have, that means way more than I could ever tell you, way more than I could ever speak. So thank you very much for the donation. Yeah,
Patriot, we appreciate you pulling up. We appreciate you pulling up.
The guy,
ain't seen Patriot Life in a minute, man. That's my broski.
Neo shouting out Jay. We also have Steven shouting out Jay, and then Steven asking, can Jay beat Ty in the Hey, Jay got close.
Man, I was leading for a good part, and then all of a sudden I started getting a little degenerate, started getting risky with my picks, trying to see if I can beat the curve, because I knew Ty was going to come up on my button, and Ty just surpassed me fast. He was picking the smart picks. I was just trying to hope I could sneak past him at some point. So yeah, hopefully we bring that back. That was a good time, but
we picked 133 games.
Whew,
I won 105 and 28.
Can't beat that. And even thinking, and that's, straight up goodness gracious. But even thinking about, like, as I'm looking at all these quarterbacks, man, both Washington quarterbacks were good. Both Oregon quarterbacks were good. Pac-12 was elite. So in y'all's top 5, in the top 5 that is listed, and Anthony, totally get why people are kind of saying that Sark has coaching experience in SEC. I mean, as an assistant coach, sure, but I mean, that's Nick Saban's team. That's not Steve Sarkeesian's team. I'm going to take the guy that can override anything you choose this side before I can take the guy that's running the offense or the defense, right? It was known that Sabin could walk up and veto something if he didn't like it. Hence why Lane Kiffin didn't last there very long. But as you mentioned, Ty, you mentioned very eloquently, Washington had much less resources in comparison to a lot of their competition. They beat Texas twice. Back-to-back bowl games. Alamo Bowl, playoffs. They beat them back-to-back. And the crazy part is Washington traveled across the country to New Orleans to win that second game. And they traveled across the country to San Antonio to win the first game. So the advantage was still in Texas' hands. Washington went out there and just won the games, right? Close, but they won them. You know, a W is a W, especially when you get to that point of the season, right? Bowl games, as well as the playoffs. You got narrow margins, and that's the goal is just to win, and they closed it out. So to me, I'm putting Kalen DeBoer either second or third, and I would put him second or third because I kind of got to give props to Brian Kelly. He walked into a dumpster fire over there at LSU and somehow came out with double-digit wins, 2 years in a row? Like, I mean, you got portal players, I get that, but he leveraged the resources he had, and we all know LSU always turns into a dumpster fire because of the coach. It ain't the program, it's the coach. They just get so comfortable and excited because it's like the voodoo there makes you the mayor and the governor and the president of the state when you do really good things, and then you start losing your mind. It's like, I don't get it. Like, I don't know how Les Miles lost his mind and thought that he should just keep his boy hired when he was obviously sucking. At a certain point, you need to fire people, right? Just go ahead and just move on when you don't see it working. And then Orgeron, he got a divorce from Miss Kelly and just turned into a new human being. I mean, I know I've told this story on the show before. I mean, I was in Vegas for March Madness. I go every year with my buddies, and my buddy my elbow me was like, "Hey, dog, that's Coach O over there." Yeah, I think she's 23. All right, I guess we understand where his life has gone as this multimillionaire great coach. So, point is, Brian Kelly walked in and was able to keep the continuity. They've always got talent at LSU. They just need the guy to coach it. Flipped them from a losing record, boom, into a double-digit win season. So that's where I would battle between it. But DeBoer's walking into a really good situation. I mean, he lost a couple of solid players, really, really good players. I mean, Caleb Downs is elite. Julian Sand was going to be the future, but I think he's kind of revamped that now. I mean, hell, y'all leading it in recruiting right now. So obviously he can recruit in the SEC. Courtney Morgan knows exactly what the heck he's doing. Dude's elite as a general manager at running things on the personnel side. I don't see a case where him walking into a place with better players, better resources, and better backing than he had in the last 3 stops he's had, and he go down. Plus, he beat the guy head to head. That, to me, is just the kind of thing. So, Sark is 4 on my books, right? I'd put Sark 4. Maybe if I want to debate it hardcore, I could probably debate him as 5. Put Lane above him because Lane's won in the SEC a lot. That's kind of where he gets a little bit of grace too, because if we're going to play that side of the fence when it comes to the SEC, you got to play both sides, right? Lane Kiffin's won in the SEC. Oh, he didn't play anybody good in the SEC. It's the SEC. I mean, that's what I've been told. I've been told that the SEC top to bottom is just elite.
Well, my
right?
argument for Lane wouldn't be that he hasn't played anybody good in the SEC because he's in the SEC West, right? And like whenever there was the conferences, the East was like Florida has been down. Tennessee is now starting to get back.
Right.
The East is where I think you could have a principled argument of like, you didn't have a hard slate to get where you went, right? And Georgia, it's one of those things where they were so great regardless, they would have been fine. But
right.
They had a much easier path than did in Alabama, who had to play a Texas A&M, an LSU, an Ole Miss, right? Like, just to get there. And you're right, Neo, it's not that anymore. But because Lane Kiffin was on the West, I wouldn't use that as the metric of argument to keep Lane Kiffin at 5. Jay, for me, it's very simple. To me, Sark is the more buttoned-up version of Lane Kiffin. Like, we talked about this, right? Like, Lane Kiffin against Alabama last year, that running game was fantastic, but he kept trying to do something that wasn't working. And Lane is brilliant. So it's like, okay, we know you can adjust, but it was almost like he was like trying to prove that what he wanted to do would work more than trying to win the football game. And that's where I'm like, I think Sark is just a bit more buttoned up than Lane. I think he can recruit better than Lane Kiffin can. Now, Lane lives in the transfer portal. I'm interested to see how that's viable long-term, right? Like, Ole Miss is one of those teams where it's not a Colorado, where they're not rebuilding via the portal, but at the same time, they're not and even in Ohio State, who, listen, we can say, Ohio, they only got 7 to 8 guys from the transfer portal. They just got massive names, right?
Right.
They're in between, where they're taking like 15, 16 guys. So that'd be the only argument. It wouldn't be who he played, because being in the West, you played good teams, right? Like that wouldn't be my argument. It would be that I think Sark is just a little bit more buttoned up.
Oh, no. I totally agree with you. I think we've talked about this. We feel like Lane Kiffin is like the middle child version, where Sark will probably be I would consider Sark as if there's a 3-child setup for Nick Saban, Sark's 1, Lane's 2, and the middle child has a tendency of, being a little stubborn, not wanting to listen, do their own thing type deal. And the youngest one is the one everybody forgets about. And you can just name any coach that's been on the list that Sabin has had. But
can we put Kirby at number 1? That way it looks a little bit better in terms of the family tree.
Yeah. Well, he's the distant older brother, the one that no one really, because he was a single child most of his life. That's kind of where I would put Kirby. The 3 bunches of coaches he's had recently, I'd put Kirby as the 4th one that, like, oh yeah, I forgot you did have like a 9-year-old or a 15-year-old and then you started over. That sucks. Type situation. But again, my thing with that's why my argument I can give to Lane is, and you're right, he played in the West, he's played against tough teams, he's had to battle. He just never had that signature win. That's the one part that has always held him back. And just like we talk about James Franklin, I think that's the thing that's going to continuously hold him back. Stubbornness in the big games. But Lane's a good spot. 5, I'm totally agreeing with. I just don't understand. I get everyone is excited that Texas finally did something. I totally get that. You're not going to convince me that a Texas team that lost to an inferior version, a coach with an inferior team, is still going to be better than the guy that has now gone in with a lot more resources. You're just not going to convince me of that.
I agree. And
on
to
paper.
me, this is where I think it gets interesting, Jay, because when I say this at face value, Coach Sean and I were debating this.
Mm-hmm.
This is tough. It seems obvious, but then I think when we really get into the nuance of it, it gets a little bit more interesting. BK and Sark, right? Like, I have BK 3, Sark 4. And this is what I said, Jay. I think whenever you look at this, whenever we talk about Steve Sarkeesian, it's very easy to point to UW and USC as a detractor. And I do think that that's like, it is fair. But I would also say, if we may, put a little asterisk next to it, because I think with Sark, it's not like that's chapter 1, 2, and now Texas is chapter 3. I think that it's 2 separate books.
Yes.
Right? And it's like, okay, well, book 1, Harry Potter touched Voldemort in the face and he turned to stone. And in book 2, he's trying to fight the big snake, right? Like,
yes.
I think that. So where would you rank those 2? And then Coach Sean, I want to get you in on this as well.
I'm still giving Brian Kelly the edge. I mean, okay. I'm giving Kelly the edge. I'm giving Kelly the edge right now because we've watched him go in and get 2 double-digit win seasons, right? He's won in the SEC, which is weird, right? That he's able to do that. Even though we all know Brian Kelly's a really good coach, right? I mean, as much as you don't like him, as most of us don't like him, right? He can coach his butt off. He figures it out. I mean, he figured out at Notre Dame, got to a natty there. He's figured it out. But there's always that but component in there. Well, now that he's got a new defensive coordinator, snatched the one up from Missouri, then went and got him a defensive line coach from Texas, he should be able to continue to ascend. We'll see how long it'll be. We'll see how long it will go for him. But I would give him that for now. I think on paper today I would. I would put, and that's where I've debated. I've debated between DeBoer and Kelly at 2 and 3 for a while. That's been a battle for me. And then, of course, like I said, Sark stays at 4 for me for now. But I've debated in between that 2 and 3 just because of the playoffs and the fact that BK's done solid for his first stint at LSU. So I would keep it. To me, I'd probably put BK at 2 right now, DeBoer at 3, just until we see what he looks like in the SEC, because he hasn't played Brian Kelly yet. So that's probably where I would stick to for now.
Gotcha. Coach Sean, what do you think?
I would not. I would not put Brian Kelly at 2, and I'll tell you why. It's like I said, for me, it's hard to compare those two because if you're saying I would put Brian in based off what he did at Notre Dame and what he's doing at LSU. That's hard for me to compare Sark to because Sark hadn't coached college football before Texas in years, as far as being a head coach. You have no choice but to put his USC and Washington background against Brian Kelly's Notre Dame background, which wasn't that long ago. That's hard for
Yeah.
me to compare, because Steve Sarkeesian coached college football a very long time ago. He was in the people forget he was in the pros for years, right? He came back and was an assistant at Alabama for a couple of years. Then he finally got his opportunity at Texas. So it's hard for me to take his USC, like you said, two different books. That was so long ago. It's very difficult for me to take that and compare that to Brian's Notre Dame record. If you're saying, well, you have to take into account Brian's Notre Dame success. Okay, well, if that's the case, you have to take into account Coach DeBoer's Washington and Sioux Falls success. If we're going to hold their background to them, if you're going to count the USC and the Washington from way back then. So I think we're our arguments are based on different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about just what they've done in the SEC, then I can't even compare that to Sark because Sark hadn't coached in the SEC. But if you're saying power rankings of the coaches, this is what I see of late. Brian Kelly's been in the SEC. His first year, he done well. Made it to the championship game, lost to Georgia, beat us. Cool. I mean, what did he do the next 2 seasons? I don't think there was double-digit wins. I think he had
They did get the double-digit win in the bowl game over
with the bowl
Wisconsin.
game. Okay,
I thought they were 9-3.
okay,
They ended up getting that when they were 10-3.
okay. So if you take the bowl game off, that's a 9-3 regular season. That's what I thought, 9-3, right?
Mm-hmm.
I watched Texas Sark get better every season he's been there. I watched them add a block every season he's been there, and finally won the dadgum thing and go to the playoffs. Right? I watched Sark take Texas, and they look better every year I saw them. Like something they did look terrible on the year before, he corrected that. They got better in the trenches. They got better with the athletes. He put that team together, man, and Texas was back. They got better. I watched Brian Kelly do well his first season. Out coached Alabama, did well. I watched this defense looks terrible the next season. They took a step back, if you ask me. Right? Same quarterback. Offense looked great, as we all know. I watched them go backwards. Right? So I don't know how to compare that to Sark. I don't know how to say that's better than what Sark done at Texas. If you're going to say, well, he did it in the SEC, that might not be enough for me, right? I watched Sark go into Texas to where I'm not a Texas fan, but I hear how the administration had say so's, powerful people had a say so in certain things. I watched Sark go in there and learn from Coach Sabin. Like, look, close the practices off. I love y'all money, but get the hell out just for a while. And I watched that team get better, better, and better. And put belt to everybody's ass. Put belt to our ass. That's a big that to come into Alabama and to win was huge, huge, man. So how do I say that's not as good as what's Brian Kelly done? This man won the Big 12, won it, right? In his what third year at Texas? Was
Yeah,
that
it's
his
third year.
third year? Third year at Texas. So I don't know. Maybe this year will tell us a little more. If you're saying Brian Kelly's better because of the course of his career, he's been more successful. Okay, I can go with that. But it's hard for me to do that because Sark has not been a college coach of late, as far as a head coach since Texas. He hadn't been a head coach since what, Washington, maybe?
USC.
Yeah,
You know,
it was no USC's when he got fired.
USC when he got fired. Okay, and
That
that
was
was
right
what?
before Clay Helton, so that's less than 10 years ago.
Yeah,
About 8. Yeah.
about 8 years ago. I mean, that's hard for me to compare to anything Brian has done of late. So it's very difficult for me to compare those two eras. I just know Sark went into Texas, a very tough place to put your boots down and say, okay, I'm here, get out the way. He went in there and now that thing is ready. That's all I can tell you. I watched Brian come into LSU and have the number 6 ranked recruiting class in 2020, the number 6 ranked recruiting class in 23, 10 in 22, 3 in 21, 4 in 20, 5 in 19, and you still hadn't won nothing. That's all I can tell you. I watched your defense look utterly ridiculous. I watched your offense be great with your transfer quarterback. And so we'll see this year with a brand new quarterback, brand new coaches, brand new. Let's see what you do. So I really don't know. I would put Sark above him just because it seems everything Sark touches, at some point he wins, assistant or head coach. And I guess
In terms of book 2, Sark, I do agree.
yes, in
it's
terms
got to
of
be
book two,
You
Sark.
can't say book
Yeah.
1 on that one.
Yeah, facts. Instead of book two, Sark, and
post Sabin Sark is the one that we can say that with.
yeah,
The
yeah,
Saints.
and that that's all I can tell you. We hadn't won nothing since the man left, so not the one thing that we looking for. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I would put Sark ahead just because Sark coached the team that won a championship and went to the playoffs and got beat by a team that did. I would put Sark ahead just for the simple fact of, are we going by what have you done for me lately, or total entire career? I don't really know. I like the what have you done for me lately because everybody can speak to that. And I watched Sark win a conference championship, man, and get better every single year, promote his team every single year. I watched Brian do well, but Brian had a side of the ball that looked terrible, and it cost him a lot of games. And I hadn't seen that from Sark, not to the point to where it was detrimental to his season.
This is why I said the Sark BK debate seems obvious at first, but then when you start diving into it, I do think it's an interesting
Yeah, it's tough.
conversation. I think it's very interesting. I want to move ahead. We all agree Lane at 5, right? Like, I don't think there's any contention.
Not at all.
Okay. Well, yeah, Steven, that's just listen, and I'm not saying this to down OU, Steven. You know how high I am on OU. That rivalry game is different.
Oh,
right?
man, I wouldn't say the same thing about like Alabama Auburn. I couldn't consider that either. It's rivalries are different. Ohio State Michigan. It's
all things go out the window, right?
What's Sark's record against Oklahoma?
1-2.
What's Brian Kelly's record against Alabama?
1-1.
So yeah, I mean,
yep.
What's the point?
Well, and
I mean,
if we even go back, Brian Kelly is 1-3 versus Alabama. No, he lost the Natty, and then he lost the playoff game.
So
did they play in the playoffs?
Yeah.
Was that the
who? What team?
Didn't Notre Dame and Alabama played in the playoffs, didn't they? Or am I?
Yeah, the same. Yeah, we played them when Najee jumped over dude that played for the Ravens now. Yeah, we did. We played Notre Dame.
No, let me see. That had to be the Cotton Bowl.
We played Notre Dame the first round in Ohio State in the championship game in 2021, I think it was, when we won.
21, they didn't make the playoffs.
2020.
2020 season. 2020. Yeah, but the game was
2021 game, 2020 season.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Rose Bowl, that's what it was. I was trying to remember which one it was that that matchup did happen. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean that's I think that the 2, 3, and 4 I think is a fascinating conversation. I want to jump ahead to 6 though. They have Stoops, right? And when I look at Stoops right there, I like it, right? Stoops is a hell of a coach. I feel like he gets disrespected a lot, but Mark Stoops has made it to where, and I know people roll their eyes, Kentucky is a program that plays hard-nosed football. I like the Stoops respect. Coach Sean, I'm going to start with you. What do you think about Stoops being at number 6?
I know players that would tell you, Bama players right now that would tell you Kentucky is one of the most physical teams they played every time Kentucky's on the schedule. I'm telling you right now, Reggie Ragland would tell you, Ruben Foster would tell you, the guys that I talk, they will tell you that Kentucky is one of the most physical. You know how you play certain games and you play them at 2 o'clock, 2:30, and after the game is over, you go home, take a shower, rest a little while. You still go out and have fun with your friends on Saturday night. Kentucky's the game where you don't even go out. You chill, you relax, you beat up. Kentucky has just not had that trigger man, right? Since Levis. Even when they had Will Levis, they just couldn't pull it all together. They had some great wins that year. Kentucky is by no stretch of the imagination a pushover. That's one of those games I told you that you can chalk it up as a win. You'll go in there on Saturday night, a good Saturday night at 7 o'clock on ESPN. That crowd, and especially if Kentucky has a great record, the crowd is crazy. It's one of those stadiums that it reminds me of Washington State, small stadium, but the crowd is absolutely bananas. They love football now, and you'll look up in the fourth quarter and your ass will be in a fight that you really shouldn't be in. Kentucky's a physical football team, man. Mark Stoops they've got new buildings and structures down there on that thing. Uh, can, believe it or not, man, football is. I'm not gonna say it's a football university yet, of course, but football. The gap between football and basketball is not as big as it used to be in Kentucky. You see a lot of Kentucky football signs everywhere in that thing. Kentucky is a respected football team, man, and you'll see that this year with a lot of teams on their schedule. They're going to beat some of those teams. Mark my words on it.
Jay, what do you think?
I disagree with you there, Coach. I think Kentucky is a football school. I think that's why John Calipari left. They
You might be right.
Giving him resources.
You might be right, man.
Right, they
Facts.
start getting resources. But no, you're
Facts.
spot on Kentucky being known for being physical. That was always the thing with the Stoops brothers. They were all infamous for being those type of coaches. And Mark coming in there, I mean, he starts off, 2 bad years. It's Kentucky, so nobody cares about football. They're just like, you know what, just make us relevant. It's like, okay, if you give me time, I'll do it. Okay. And relevant, I mean, I'm going to try to get to the bowl games every year at least, right? Keep us in the middle of the pack, which is tough for a program there that is so focused on the hoops, because that's all we think about is basketball on when it comes to Kentucky. He walks in there and he's been in a bowl game every year since 2016, right?
Crazy.
Every 3 years since 2016, he's won getting 10 games, right? 7-6, 7-6, 10. 7-6, 7-6, 10. 7-6, 7-6, and now this is the year for 10 wins, right? He's on a consistent streak of doing that, and it's just hard work, right? His linebacker room right now is considered one of the best in the country, right? His defense is up there. I think Phil Steele had him ranked pretty high as to what those units are, especially on the defensive side. Bringing in Brock Vandegrift, he could possibly do something in that system. We'll see. I mean, Will Levis did something. Good way you can get that out of Brock as well. But no, I think that the respect for him here is awesome. This is where he should be. I was thinking, as soon as I saw it, I was like, yeah, Stoops' respect is definitely deserved. He's done a phenomenal job of persevering at a program that just doesn't care. His job to me is almost as great. He's like inching up. If he gets another 10-win season, he'll surpass what James Franklin did at Vanderbilt, in my mind. Because that's something we ain't seeing that at Vanderbilt probably ever for like another 20 years, right? Walking there and going to multiple bowl games the way he was. But yeah, he definitely deserves to be at that spot. That was a fantastic place.
And remember this, don't look now, but Kentucky has facilities, football, practice field, all these things that they never even attempted to pay for. Facilities are outstanding at Kentucky. And ask anybody who's been there. Football facilities, crazy.
I love this. Ben G says, I know this is Chad is drinking SEC Kool-Aid because KY is never a must-watch game unless it requires to you. Right?
I know.
I think you're talking to a panel that's college football obsessed, and so I'm excited to watch Kentucky. I'm not going to lie to you. And that's not to say that I think Kentucky. Let me be very clear here, Benji. I'm not saying Kentucky's a world beater. Kentucky is a middle-of-the-road team in the SEC. But they're one of those middle-of-the-road teams in the SEC where it's like, okay, if we overlook them, they're going to punch us square in the jaw a few times, and we might end up in a fight that is tough to get out of just because of the way they played. Now, this past year, Jay and I talked about this ad nauseum on Bleacher Report, and I hate to say this because I never want to be talk negative about anybody, but the Leary experiment did not work at all in terms of how we thought it was. Ben G says, do facilities really matter in today's college football world, or does NIL budget matter more? They both matter. Both
are important. You got to have the facilities to develop them on top of paying them.
No doubt.
It's kind of like how Mark Cuban did really well in Dallas and was able to get Dirk that championship. The thing that Dallas was infamous for, the Mavericks themselves were infamous for, is it took care of the players. They did everything. They had chefs. They had, they had private cars for everything. They did everything to make the players excited about trying to attract talent there. Now, it was a struggle. It's always been a struggle for Dallas for some weird reason to get superstars to come down there. But in his tenure, he's able to get a championship and play in the finals, play in 2 finals because he was able to attract enough players because of how awesome the facilities and everything is. that's something that's important when it comes to some of these young players. They still got to be developed, right? Like, yeah, you can pay them like crazy, but if you're not doing anything to get them better outside of just coaching, you're not going to win games. And I think that's where those facilities component comes in with NIL. Well, we've seen teams with really good players and really good facilities not do anything, right? You got to have the right type of facilities and coaches. So many components.
It's a puzzle piece, Ben. I'm not saying that NIL doesn't matter, right? Of course, it absolutely matters. I'm saying the facilities do. Like whenever RJ Moore Malone was on last week, this is someone, Ben G, who takes players across the nation and helps them get scholarships, and he's very in tune with these young guys. And he was even saying like facilities, they matter, right? Like that's something that absolutely matters. So number 6 is interesting. Now, gentlemen, this is where we get into the weeds. I love that comment. Wait, are those facilities from Rocky? Like when Drogo is going, that's a good comment. But
that's a good one.
This is where we get into the weeds. All right. This is where I think you start having some major contentions on how you rank this. At 7, I'm just going to go 7 to 16 right now, naming them, and then we'll unpack it. That way I paint the picture adequately. At 7, you have Drinkwitz. At 8, Josh Heupel. 9, Mike Elco. 10, Hugh Freeze. 11, Brent Venables. 12, Shane Beamer. 13, Napier. 14, Pittman. 15, Clark Lee. And 16, Jeff Lebby. I think it's, I can just say 16, even though I think Lebby is going to grow into, like, he's still so young. I think that his offense is still maturing. I do think he's adequately placed at 16 because he's a first-time head coach. Like, how in good faith can I put him over anybody on this list when you're a first-time head coach? That's tough for me. But let's start with 7, Drinkwitz. Gentlemen, this is where I have a tough time with the parameters of this list. Because before last season, we were talking about Drinkwitz being on the hot seat. Now, they did a fantastic job last year. They did. They had really good pieces throughout that team. Now, they return Cook. They return Luther Burden. 2 guys who are unbelievable. I do like Carroll, the running back who's going to take over, but I really wish they would have gone and gotten Dylan Edwards.
Yeah, we talked about that, yeah.
Yeah, if they would have done that, boy, you'd hear me singing a completely different tune.
Game changer.
About Missouri. But, Jay, I'll start with you and then go to Coach Sean. Drinkwitz at 7, above Heupel, above, which Elco at 9, that's interesting as well. We'll get into that, right? Because this is his first stint as a head coach, no? Or no.
No, he was at Duke last year.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know why.
Went to Duke for 2 years and came back. So, yeah, no, I get you.
I just imagined him going, he did a great job at Duke, right? So, yeah, Elco's interesting. Hugh Freeze, Brent. Drinkwitz at 7. What are you thinking, Jay?
Y'all know my feeling on that, right? I've kind of voiced myself when it comes to that. You said it perfectly, Ty. This guy was on the hot seat. Then he got himself a nice little easy schedule. Worked perfectly with certain teams that were a little down. Won some solid games. I mean, they beat Tennessee. Even though, depending on who you ask, they'll tell you about that Tennessee team last year as, meh, right? But they lost to Georgia. They lost to LSU. Right. If we're considering these teams good. Yeah. Florida's a little down. Arkansas, of course, is way down.
Way down.
Way down. And they beat an Ohio State team 14-3 that wasn't even trying to play offense. They were basically being Iowa in that bowl game. They didn't have a quarterback. They didn't have much of anything. They were basically playing Iowa football. They were trying to punt on second down so they could play more defense. And that game was it was just a slugfest of awful offense all the way up until the end of it when Missouri finally started scoring touchdowns, right? But 11-win season is what got Drink all this love and praise. Not top 10 recruiting classes to go with it. Not top 20 recruiting classes to go with it. Just a 11-win season. I don't see why he's that high, right? It's like I asked the question, and this is why I mentioned this before. Either we got to have it both ways when it comes to the SEC, right? Either when he's winning in the SEC, he's playing a whole bunch of good teams or down teams, or are every team in the SEC considered good or not? And this is not for you all. This is more so for the broad people that make these statements, because that's usually the arguments they make. Oh, he went 11-2 in the SEC. He blah 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 blah.
SEC okay, cool. Least, mind you.
Right. But it's still the SEC. That's what they're in their mindset is, oh, they did it in the SEC. And it's like, but that's not how that works. Every conference has mediocre and bad teams. It may be more physical because they have to prepare for it. They've got, a little bit better pool of players when it comes to size, but coaching ain't the same. So he's getting so many props on this. No, he's not that high yet. I need to see you do it again. Now, schedule is lined up to where he should, because he ain't really playing nobody, non-con, and luckily the way the SEC set up these schedules, which that's also another thing that's kind of bothered me, that so many people are talking about how Oklahoma, Florida's being punished, Alabama got punished.
Those are fun conversations to have. Look, don't get me wrong. I know why they did it, but it's a lot more fun to me to think that they have dirt on Billy Napier, and the only reason that they're not going to release it is by giving him this hard schedule. That's a lot more fun in my mind.
It is. I agree with you there. But it's just like, oh, they're rewarding Texas for coming in. Yes, they have rewarded Texas with a schedule based upon how awful they were for the last 12 years. That's how all of this was set up. And the SEC announced that after the schedule. They put out the presser, and I've posted it numerous times, and like nobody, and it's not casual fans. I don't expect casual fans to truly get it. It's more so these media members, right? People like me trying to be in the media. It's did you do the research first? Am I the only one that did the reading? Because it felt like it when I see these come out, but I digress from that. Missouri has lucked out on their side of the conference. Now, once things shift, we'll see what they are in the next couple of years, but no, that's way too high. I would not put him over Heupel today at all. Trying to decide if I would make him top 10, but I would not put him over Heupel today.
And Coach Sean, I got to hear your take on that, because that was going to be my question and you beat me to it. What do you think? Because don't get me wrong, I want to be as fair as possible. They had a great year last year. They really did. But this is where we keep going back to this. What are the parameters? Is it just what you did last year?
Right.
Or are we looking at a larger body of work? What's your thoughts here, Coach Sean?
That's what I was going back to with the Sark Brian Kelly thing. If you're talking about what they done last year, okay, I can understand where a casual fan would say Eli was better. I get it. You saw what he done. You saw the quirkiness. You seen the interviews. You seen the fan interaction after the wins, and the I get it. I get where that would steer your mind to believe that. If you're talking about as a whole, their coaching prowess or what they've done, I remember Josh Heupel at UCF and how well they did. I remember Josh Heupel in all these assistant positions and how well he done. Josh Heupel, to me, at this stage, is a better coach than Eli Drinkwitz. It's no disrespect to Eli. Eli has a very good offensive mind. He but I think Josh is a more seasoned, especially at home, a very much better coach than Eli. This list, I understand it. He's hot right now. His team is doing well. They're getting lots of love. Missouri, right? But I do believe I would have Josh Heupel above Eli Drinkwitz for right now. This is a very, very, very important inaugural season for a lot of teams, with the CFP coming into effect, with the different adding of teams and all these different conferences. This season is going to be really, 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 really crazy. But I don't think this is what people remember. I think people get so caught up in the wins, they forget about this. Every year you got losses in conferences, right? Every year it's teams that lose that shouldn't have lost, right? Every season it's teams that that'll drop games that you shouldn't have dropped that game. You can have a lot of that this year in this conference. You can replay this now. It's going to be a lot of teams that we think are going to be absolutely great and have an opportunity that's going to get beat by Mississippi State. That's going to get beat by an Ole Miss. That's going to get beat by a Kentucky, right? A Kentucky team that's had Kentucky now, this basketball school, right? A record football sellout since 2022, right? Kentucky, who never had football sellout. It's going to be a team to go on the road, and not play well and lose a game, right? So, and it could be any one of our teams. So with
South
that being
Carolina's
said,
going to knock somebody off.
yeah, exactly, brother. You mark my word. That is so true, Jay. South Carolina's going to sneak up and get some people. It's going to be some teams lose that you like, wow, really? So this season is going to be very important. I would put Josh Heupel in front of Eli Drinkwitz at this point in time. I think Josh is an overall better coach at this stage. Sure, Eli had a better team last year. But again, is it just what you did last year, or is it coaching power index? Who is the better coach and what they've done?
Now, to raise the stakes on this conversation, where do we put Elco in this floating list? Because I'm going to give you guys some numbers here that is pretty wild, right, in terms of just an incredible turnaround. Elco inherited a program from David Cutcliffe that was 3-9. They ranked outside the top 100 in points per game. They ranked outside the top 100 in points allowed per game. That was 2021. We go to 2022. They were 9-4. Inside the top 35 for points per game. Inside the top 35 for points allowed per game. We go to 2023. Now, this is interesting because they were really looking pretty good, and then Leonard gets hurt. Right, and then it was kind of, we know what a major force he was for that team. And I understand we can't play revisionist history, so I can't sit here and say, oh, well, they win this game, this game, this game, this game, and this game if Riley Leonard is there. But what I think we can all agree on, two different teams, with Riley Leonard, without Riley Leonard. Mm-hmm. So where do we put Elco? Because, I mean, the turnaround, and if we go to opponent's points per game, they went from 31st in 2022 after he inherited a program that was 127th out of 130 to 31st in 2022 to 17th in 2023. Now, the offense fell off a cliff. They went from 32nd in 2022 to 68th, but like I said, their dude got hurt. What do we do with Elco and Duke whenever we're looking at the Drinkwitz, Heupel, Elco conversation? Jay, I'll start. Coach Sean, I'll start with you. We started Jay last time, and then we'll go to Jay.
That's extremely difficult because I can honestly sit here and tell you that it's easy. It's a little easier for me to look at Kalen DeBoer, who's never coached a game in the SEC, and know what I'm getting. A guy who's been a head coach at several stops, a guy who's been successful as a head coach at several stops. With Coach Elco, I know him more for being a successful assistant than a successful head coach. I mean, I understand his background. I get it. But I gotta wait, and I really don't know what I'm getting yet. I mean, I can understand, especially with the assistants that he hired. Didn't he hire my man from Ole Miss that used to be at Oklahoma? Lebby, I think his name's Lebby.
No, Lebby is the head coach of Mississippi State now.
Okay, he got a head coaching job. Okay. I just don't know what I'm getting with Elco, man. Texas A&M is brother. That's a big job. You understand what I'm saying? Texas A&M. Don't be fooled. Now, Texas A&M is a big job, man. They got a lot of fans. They got a lot of money. Lots of those wonderful little green dollars. You know, they spend a lot of money there. I had an opportunity to go to their stadium on an away game, and you know, it's a different kind of crowd down there, right? But
yeah,
but make no mistake about it, they love football. So I just don't know, will Elco be able to? Now, I will say this about Elco. I know he's a strict coach. Some of the things that was going on under Jimbo Fisher will not go on at Texas A&M. You can believe that. It's a lot of kids that got up out of there, when coach came. The guy's a good head coach now, don't get it wrong. I just don't know what you're getting in that environment with this coach. It's either going to go, I can tell you this, I think it's either going to go very, very well, or it's going to go really, really, really bad, there. Does the culture adhere to the coach like we did at Alabama? Because when Coach Sabin got to Alabama, the culture kind of ran the head coaches. The culture of money, the culture of high school coaching, the coaches sort of the high school coaches administration kind of ran the athletic department as far as football is concerned. When Coach Sabin came, he put his own fingerprint. People forget that they hated Coach Sabin his first year. I know personally, they did not like Coach Sabin. They did not like him. He came in and changed up everything. He wouldn't allow certain people at practice. He came in, the first sentence he said, "Get these TVs down in the weight room. Get these TVs the hell down. Get them down." And everybody was looking like, what? You know what I mean? So I heard all about it. So he turned a lot of people off. We didn't do well his first season. Everybody was like, man, this ain't gonna work. Who is this crazy little Napoleon guy running around? So, is that going to happen at Texas A&M? Right? Will the culture allow him time to build what he wants to build based off what Texas A&M has been through with Jimbo Fisher? You're paying him a god-awful amount of money. Some of your kids from that recruiting class, well, let's be honest, most of your kids from that great recruiting class aren't even there anymore. The culture sucks from what we hear. I don't know. I just can honestly tell you guys, I don't know. All I can tell you is Coach Elco is a very good coach, man. He's a very good coach. Duke and all these other, the guy can coach. He understands recruiting. He understands philosophy. He understands culture. The question is, will he be able to do that at a place like Texas A&M, who has the fire on their asses right now because Texas is doing so well? Patience is out the door. As long as Texas is doing well, belts to asses will be put in Texas A&M. You better believe that, administratively wise. I would say if Texas wasn't in the SEC and weren't doing so well, he would probably have his time to do what he want to do. You better believe if Texas is doing well, the people at Texas A&M aren't getting any sleep, right? So I think that'll have a lot to do with it. I really do. I think Coach Elco is a great coach. I think he's ready for big moments. Will the culture allow him time to do what he wants to do and to instill his culture in a place like that?
I think that's a fantastic argument, and it just muddies the water on 7 through 11 to me. And Jay, not to muddy it more for you, but I'm going to. Because after Elco at 9, you have Hugh Freeze at 10, and then Brent Venables at 11. So how do we view this 7 through 11 of Drinkwitz at 7, Heupel at 8, Elco at 9, Hugh at 10, and then Venables at 11? Because this, to me, is where we get into okay, I think there are some really interesting debates and conversations to happen through here. Crazy. Talk to me.
No, I get you on that. I totally agree. The 7 through 11 is probably the most intriguing portion of it because 12 through 16 are really your hot seat and then the new guy, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of get that, right? Hugh Freeze has only been at Auburn for a year, so he's going to get some time. Elco's new there at A&M, even though he was an assistant there before. Went to Duke, went 9-4 his first year at Duke. That's something that cannot be understated. He went to Duke and won 9 games.
Inheriting a program that was once again the year before in 2021, 3-9, that had the 102nd offense in the nation and the 127th defense in the nation, went 9-4 with the 32nd offense and the 31st best defense.
And finished 8-5 the next year, and his starting quarterback was gone.
A starting quarterback who, Jay, you and I talked about as being a dude.
We love Riley Leonard, Duke and ball. So I sense that Elco walking back into the program, in which, Coach, you're exactly right. A lot of those big-time players that were there are gone when he was defensive coordinator. A lot of them. But that defensive line is still intact for the most part. You still got your David Hickses of the world, right? You did lose, Walter Nolan, which some of us wonder if he's more of a head case than anything. We don't know. We have to see what he looks like when he plays for the Lane Train, and we'll see how that goes. But no, a lot of players that Elco was involved with, some of them are still there. So he's going to have to show us that he can do this now. Like I said, in the SC, he's got to do it. But I do think that I think that he should probably be one spot under Hugh Freeze, even though Hugh Freeze has only been at Auburn for 1 year. He spent time in the SEC at Ole Miss. Did good things at Ole Miss, right? Just couldn't stop doing stupid things, right? And that seems to be a tradition for a lot of the coaches in that area, right? They just want to do something dumb. And he's now has the opportunity to pay players, and he didn't have to have any questions about it. He should be able to find a way to get better year after year. But A&M's going to be a tough one. But I think Elco may be the one that shocks us the most out of the coaches on this list. I think that A&M team, if he can change the culture, which most of the dudes that left were the culture problems. If he's got a new culture going, it's a good chance that he can actually win some games that could surprise some folks. Hugh Freeze at 10, like I said, it's interesting because, he's making his valiant return. We still got to figure out who his quarterback is, if Thorne's really going to be that guy. And Ty gets a good giggle out of the thought of that kid playing quarterback for them. So we won't go too far in that. And then Venables at 11, in which him and Sark being the newer coaches, bringing their teams over to the conference, so an entire organization over in comparison to just a coach. I'm okay with Venables being there at 11. Third, he's been a head coach for 2 seasons, right? He's shown improvement, shown culture change. He's seen that exact same thing that a lot of people have given him credit for. But he has to refresh. He has places where there's those questions because of refreshes. And I think that that's very fair. I'm not going to even fight and say, oh, no, that's just no, it's fair. It's fair for him to be there today. Now, as the season progresses, me and Ty's talked about this on a few shows or whatnot. We've given Brent Venables what he performs best with. Defensive players that have been in this system for multiple years.
3 to be
ones
exact.
that he wanted. Ones that work for what he wants to do. Ones that now understand, oh, this is my assignment. And if I do my assignment, he does his assignment, we all get success. He's got that going for him. He's just going to have to show it now. Once again, he's got to prove himself, Borderline Missouri show me state, which is weird that Missouri has this guy going at a number 7, and he hasn't really shown us anything, especially with the new look. But I digress. He's got to prove it. And I think that that's beyond fair. I have no problem with it. Hugh has experience in the conference. Elco has experience in the conference. Heupel has had 2 really good seasons in the conference, taking back a team and really getting them vamped as Tennessee has gone through multiple coaches to try to get to this point. He's got there. I'm still just confused. But if I was to revamp this, Drink would probably be 10 or 11. Him and Venables will be fighting for their spot. And sure, 11 and 2's cool. He was on a hot seat. Sometimes you get a flash in the pan.
We thought he was going to get fired. I had to eat crow in Missouri because I thought he was done.
He was on the path to it, and caught lightning in the bottle when he made that field goal against Kansas State, that deep one, to win the game. Then things just started going up for him. Can't be mad about that. I need to see it again. Especially after losing staff members. That type of coach. So, yeah.
So, I don't disagree, right? And this is where I would definitely have Elco over Drink. Just because I'm looking at this of if I was the AD at a program, right? I think I'm going to modify the parameters of this right quick on the fly, guys. And I think a way that is easiest to digest in a way that encompasses everything. You are now the AD at X program in the SEC. Who do you go to? Personally, one, let it be known, I'm a defensive person. I love defensive football. So I'd take Elco probably over a Drinkwitz, right? Because I just think that what I see out of Elco is just consistent improvement. Though, Coach Sean, I do very much well agree with your argument about it not being so much an Elco question, it being a question of A&M, right? So I agree with that. But Jay, this is where I agree with you and I disagree with you. And I know people are going to call me a hater for this. And that's fine. I accept that. I hate the way that you walk. I hate the way that you talk. I hate the way that you dress, right? I would take Venables. If I was creating a program right now, I would take Venables over Hugh Freeze. I would. Why? Because when I look, Hugh is a great coach. But unfortunately, when we look at college football, it's more than just being a coach. I have more faith in the cultures Brent Venables cultivates than I do in the cultures that Hugh Freeze cultivates. So I personally would have Venables over Freeze. And to me, it wouldn't be tough to think about. I would have Heupel over Drinkwitz. I'd have Elco over Drinkwitz. But to me, Venables would go over Freeze. And then, like you said, Jay, I do want to be respectful and give you credit for doing well in the SEC last year. And they did play Georgia tough. Fair. But I do agree. It would then be a debate of Drinkwitz and then Venables. Like, what are we doing here? But if I'm talking long-term, I don't know, man. Like, I think I'd take Venables.
Just coaching, right? Like, I know a lot of people.
It's more than that. It's coaching. It's what kind of culture are you going to cultivate? And that's why, to me, I'm like, if I'm talking X's and O's, Hugh Freeze is a great coach. Mm-hmm. But that's only one part of coaching. If we were talking coordinators, X's and O's is your job. That's all you worry about. Boom. We're talking head coaches. I don't worry about the culture Brent Venables is cultivating.
Fair
right?
point.
And so to me, I would have Venables higher than 11. I'd have him over Hugh. And then, like you said, the Drinkwitz Venables debate for 9 and 10 to me is where we would be really having this. But I like the upside of Brent Venables. Coach Sean, I want to get your take on that little contention.
All right, Jets, I got to jump real quick and do some work. I'll be listening on the side. Y'all be good.
All right, Jay.
All right.
As far as Venables, man, I like Coach Venables. Venerables. I hate to butcher the man's name. I don't know, man. I don't know because, again, are we talking about Hugh's only been there 1 year? Brent's only been there, 2 years?
2 years, inherited a program. And listen, this is where we have to get into a nuanced conversation because I every time I talk about what Brent inherited, people direct me to what Lincoln Riley went the year before, and they were like, oh, but they were winning games. Sure, but was it sustainable? I don't think it was going to be sustainable. And then we have to acknowledge that though they were winning games, Caleb Williams left. You had a few players transfer out, and we know how impactful Caleb Williams was. Don't believe me? Look at what he did at USC year 1. That team didn't have a great defense. They had some really good wide receivers. They had some really good offensive pieces. I'm not arguing that. But Venables didn't it's almost a facetious argument to point at the record.
Yeah.
That Brent Venables inherited of the team and say, oh, it was a good thing. It wasn't. They didn't play defense. They didn't have their star quarterback. It would be easier for me to digest that argument, Coach Sean, of people being like, oh, well, he inherited a team that won X games if Caleb Williams would have stayed. Because then it's like, okay, you have a superstar at quarterback, which puts you on a level that not many college teams can say we genuinely have a cheat code at quarterback. He had to completely revamp the culture. He had to completely change from an offensive philosophy to a defensive philosophy while being a first-time head coach. And I think that he has done a really good job of doing it, right? Like, I know people kind of look down on the Big 12 because they're not the SEC. They're not, but the Big 12 is still a conference where Kansas State is a darn good football team, right? Texas under Sark has been improving. You had the year with Baylor, which Baylor hasn't been good since. Kansas was real good, right? So it's not like the Big 12 of 5 years ago or 6 years ago where it was like, well, we know who's going to just run through this, no questions asked. It was a conference that was actually better over the past 2 years, I think, than some people will give it credit for because of, you know, that intermediary history from when Texas fell off. Oklahoma ran the conference, and they did so with such fluidity, with such ease. I think it left a bad taste in people's mouth, but What's your thoughts, Coach Sean?
I think when I look at these two guys, again, you can't really go back prior to Auburn and prior to Oklahoma because Brent wasn't a head coach
I
and
agree.
Coach Freeze was at Liberty. Coach Freeze did some great things at Liberty and won more than anybody, right? But does that really put him ahead? Does that make him a better head coach at Auburn than Brent is at Oklahoma? I just don't know. What I can tell you is if I'm comparing these two coaches, I look at Brent as a defensive guru, Coach Freeze is an offensive guru, right? We know those sides of the ball are their expertise. How does the other side of the ball look, right? When I look at Oklahoma, Brent is getting his people in to create an outstanding defense. It looks like his offense is going to be pretty damn good too.
That wide receiver room is going to be insane.
Yeah, I think the tools are at Oklahoma to create more of an advantage for Brent. When I look at Hugh, obviously he didn't really have the quarterback he wanted, but he got a quarterback. He's got some young guys that he like. His offense give us issues. His offense did what they could do with the amount of talent they had. And they got some young guys that's coming in. It's going to be a problem. But I think Auburn's defense wasn't what they usually are in the SEC. They were very predictable. Their scheme was very vanilla in the biggest games. Now they played well against Alabama at times. They played well against Georgia at times. But through this, it's easy to get up for the two biggest games on your schedule. Every team's going to do that. How do you look against the teams on your schedule throughout the season? Their defense didn't play very well. So it's a huge toss up when you're talking about these two guys because I honestly believe they're both at similar spots. Auburn's got some young guys coming in on the offensive side of the ball that's going to help them. How do they do? They got some young guys and some veteran backs on back on defense. How do they do? Brent has some awesome guys coming in on offense, some young guys going to help his offensive side of the ball. How do they do? His defense has some people returning, and they got some guys coming back in to help that defense. How do they do? I really don't know. Like I said, this season to me, I'll really be able to answer these questions because it's so much unknown. It's so much unknown out there. As far as the coach himself, um, I think Brent Venables was one of the best assistants that you could bring in that fit the culture at Oklahoma. I think Brent's fingerprint is all over that recruiting class. And I think Oklahoma's doing the things they need to do to be successful, not just on the offensive side of the ball, but to come into this league and really be successful on the defensive side of the league. I think just as well at Auburn, Hugh is doing things to be successful on the side of the ball that he knows. With Coleman coming in, all those receivers coming in, the guy from Thompson coming in, all those receivers and
Yeah, got
offensive
a good wide
linemen.
receiver class.
Yeah, he's doing some things to help him on the side of the ball that he know, as well as bringing in some transfer guys and some young kids on the other side of the ball that he doesn't, that it's not his forte. So these guys are at very, very similar spots. I know he's been at Auburn 1 year, he's been in Oklahoma 2 years. Um, I think this will really tell the story this year, especially for Brent. I think Brent is farther, obviously, Brent is farther along than Coach Freeze is. I think Brent has really, really, really extenuated these two recruiting classes and built it in his image. He's got some killers on defense coming in. He's got some monsters. Shout out to Emmanuel Choice on offense. I think Oklahoma's going to pick back up. They have enough talent on both sides of the ball to beat a lot of teams that the people don't. It's not going to pick them to beat. In hindsight, Auburn. I think Auburn is maybe a year away as far from being very competitive. They're going to be exceptionally young at a lot of spots. Now that young talent is going to get better and better throughout the season, especially with that head coach. But I think Auburn's trigger man and the youth of that team is going to show its ugly head on the road. So I would definitely if I had to pick one, I would put Brent a little bit ahead by a smidgen, only because he's had 2 years in his program, knowing where his program is going to go and building his program to that image of what he wants to see on the field.
I've always said OU is going to be so fascinating this year because on the defensive side of the ball, they return the most talent in the SEC. They return, I believe, the 9th or 10th most talent
Yeah.
Anybody in chat can correct me on that. It's 9, 10, or 11. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, when we come into this show, we don't have notes, right? My notes that I've wrote are from when we're talking about the show, like where they rank the list, the moves, those are all the arrows you may see. There are no notes. So, like, I could be wrong, but I don't remember whether it's 9, 10, or 11 nationally where they rank. But they return the most talent in the SEC on defense and the least amount of talent in the SEC on offense. That being said, you have a guy for your offensive line coach that you do give the benefit of the doubt, Bill Bedenbaugh. I'm interested to see how good the offensive line will be. Like, when I say that you give them the benefit of the doubt, what I mean is I don't think the OU is going to have a bad offensive line. Right? There are certain offensive line coaches out there that just get the job done more, which obviously he's not an offensive line coach anymore. But when he gets the job done, Kyle Flood at Texas, he gets the job done. You look at what he took over at Rutgers and just an immediate impact. Everywhere he's gone, Kyle Flood has had an immediate impact, both on field and in terms of recruiting. Bill Bedenbaugh is one of those guys, right? He's just a hell of an offensive line coach. It's looking like Coach Cap, now given the Alabama resources, now surrounded by this offense. Let's hope that he's one of those guys as well. It's looking like he could be. So I don't expect OU's offensive line to be bad. My question is how good is it going to be? Because to me, that's going to answer like where you will ultimately end up. So that's the biggest question. 128 consecutive starts among the OU offensive line. Boomer, if you could link me that. Because I was under the impression that OU was replacing most of their offensive linemen. That's what I was told by PG and J and them. So if you could send me where to find that information, right? Because that's did y'all just play musical chairs with the offensive line last year? Right? Because most of your guys left. 3-star. Yeah, no. Bedenbaugh's amazing. Bedenbaugh's amazing. But like, how good is your offensive line going to be? That's the question. That will really unlock like what your offense does. Not worried about the wide receiver room. I think that they have one of the better wide receiver rooms in the nation. Running backs, they got some running back talent coached by DeMarco Murray. So I'm excited for that. I do believe in Jackson Arnold. I think that he'll continue to grow. He'll be a good quarterback. So that to me is where that conversation gets really interesting.
Earlier, when we were talking about Josh Heupel, I was going to answer one of the guys' questions. They were saying that UCF didn't they decline under Heupel? Absolutely not. His first season, they went 11. They went undefeated. In 2000, what was it? 18 and 19, or he's either 17 and 18 or 18 and 19. He only was there 2 seasons. They went 11-0. They won the AAC. They went on to play LSU in the bowl game, and I think they lost 40-32 to LSU. The next season, so that's one game they lost that year. The next season they come in, they go 10-3 or 10-2 on the season, making another bowl game. So his whole time there, they were 22-4.
He went 6-4 that last season.
That last season, yeah. So I mean, he balled out his first couple of seasons there. He made his bones. I think he came in from Missouri, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Missouri.
And didn't Gabriel get hurt in that 2020 season?
The starting quarterback, if I remember, he got hurt. He did something. I remember. Dylan Gabriel, wasn't it? Or was it Mackenzie Milton?
No, it was Dylan Gabriel in the 2020 season, and I think he got hurt.
Yeah, so he represented there, man.
Maybe he didn't. I don't know.
I think that's where he went to Tennessee from UCF, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, man. But I don't know, man. It's so many coaching. I don't even know how you put together a list of these guys right now, because you have guys like Hugh, who've only coached 1 year at Auburn, right? I know he lost to New Mexico State and all that. Man, listen, when you coach in college football, when you coach in any football, your first year is almost a mulligan, bro. You're playing with somebody else's players. Some of these guys may not fit your scheme at all. Like you know, it's just really very, very tough in your first season. Very rarely do you see coaches like Coach DeBoer who can come in the first season and have guys who are super duper talented, guys who are versatile enough to especially on the defensive side of the ball to transition from what the last coach done to what this coach likes to do. Uh, it's not a lot of coaches that come into a roster where you have Jam Miller and Justice Haynes on the same roster. That's one hell of a plus. So we can spin it any way you really want to spin it. Ty is very difficult. I think this season. What's up, Travel Panier Sportscast? Shout out to Travel Panier. It'll be. I think this season is where you'll really, really, really get to answer a lot of these questions. I can't wait for this season. It's going to be a lot of things happen. It's going to shock people. Um, Earlier we were talking about Alabama and acting like Alabama was going to fall off a cliff. I got to totally disagree with the young man. Alabama has gotten any love really from the national pundits. Forget some recruiting. Nobody thinks Alabama's going to win the SEC. Nobody thinks Alabama's going to do anything in the playoff. No one's giving Alabama love, right? They're picking other schools in the SEC as much as I've ever seen, right? So I do think these kids from Alabama will have a chip on their shoulder. Matter of fact, I know it personally for a fact. I do think that's keeping a lot of them here for the summer, not going home, working, and I love it. I do think with Coach Sabin retiring, that there's a lot of people that see quote unquote chinks in the armor. When what you're seeing is not chinks, it might just be space for somebody else to come in and pick the flag up and keep this thing going. I think Coach DeBoer would do some things that are better suited for Alabama in 2024 than Coach Saban would have done in 2024, going into 2025. What I mean by that is Coach Saban had his way of doing things. We all know that. Coach Saban would tell you this out of his own mouth. There's things that Coach Saban was completely out of touch with in this era. I know personally that Alabama's recruiting of late sucked, right? I know this personally just from kids I coached. The recruiting sucked. The coaches that they had on their campus weren't
Not the
very good
recruit.
at
And
recruiting.
let me clarify for people in the chat because I know Benji. He's going to jump on that. Not the recruiting rankings. The recruiters on staff
Yeah,
outside of like a Robert Gillespie or Freddie Roach.
I was gonna get to that too. This is for the fan that don't understand. What I mean is you got a lot of Saban discounts with Coach Saban there. You didn't get a lot of kids because your team out recruited another team. That just didn't happen at Alabama. I'll be honest with you. I know this personally. I had a high school coach tell me about 2 weeks ago that some of their recruiters sucked. Like he just straight up said it, right? But you always had that name, Nick Saban. That kids, okay, I'm still gonna go. Even though this guy hadn't talked to him in 2 weeks, but they posted that I have talked to him, which was a lie. I'm still going to Bama because of that guy. That's what I mean. Some of your recruiters sucked. Not all of them. You had some star guys like T. Rob, like a couple of guys on the campus, like Freddie Roach, like Robert Gillespie. Some of your other position coaches were terrible at recruiting. Terrible. Didn't want to do it. Didn't want to do it. And that's what it was. If you leave it just to that, Alabama was lacking the last couple of years. This is a fact. You did not recruit these kids with Georgia. You did not recruit LSU. You did not recruit a lot of staffs. So, but you had Nick Saban. So
which made up for it.
Which made up for it. Yes, you got a Saban discount. Man, look, Nick's still there. Who cares? We going. Well, Coach Saban's gone. Now you got to get guys that understand an 18-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid, 16-year-old kid. You got to get guys that understand how to relate to these young men. And it's not, bringing them to your house to do line dancing. It's just not that in today. It's just not that. I'm telling you from personal experience, it's not that. These kids want the bells and whistles. They want to be wooed. They want to go on these trips. They want to promote the Alabama brand with their hand. They want to do so many different things. People laughed at Brian Kelly for doing the little, where they get on the little spin doing, they spin around and him in the recruiting, he's dancing and all that. Ask yourself what would make a respected And we didn't even, and they didn't even get that kid. He came to Bama, Danny Lewis.
Yep.
What would make a respectable coach like Brian Kelly do that? I'll tell you, he clearly understands today's kid. Even though he didn't get that one, he definitely got a few of his own. He had his own wins. So I congratulate Coach DeBoer. I say all that to say Coach DeBoer and his staff fit what kids love today. Kids are I try not to say nothing negative. Kids are not built in 2024 like they were built in 2017, right? And I say that because society is not built in 2024 like it was in 2017. So I staff, what they're doing is working. We still got to hold on to these kids, but I have great faith in what this staff is doing. They're recruiting the kids with great character, they're recruiting the parent, and they're showing them the bells and whistles that Alabama has to offer through NIL and through sheer love of the coaching staff. And I got to give them an A+ right now for that.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And Benji, nobody's saying that Bama is a dynasty. I think we're just pointing out the facts that the coaching staff that they have now is better suited to recruiting in 2024 than was a Bill O'Brien and a Doug Marrone, right? This is why nuance is incredibly important. And without that, you get, it's just incredibly important to understand the point as a whole. Let's see. I had 2 comments and then we're going to get out of here. Thoughts on Meadows pushing his announcement back a week? So I just listened to Katie's induction to the call. I have no idea what you're talking about, Benji.
Some of these fans don't know, man. You just got to.
Yeah, I mean,
cracking. They don't know.
I think some people try and be purposefully obtuse and not get the point. But that is what it is, right? What are you going to
do? Yeah. Keep going.
You have Derek Meadows pushing back his commitment dates. What's my thoughts on that? Who knows, man? Who knows? LSU apparently has come into this battle and really made it interesting. So that's that. LSU's always done a great job with wide receivers. I have no idea what to think about that, Brandon. We were talking about that in the group chat between Coach Sean, Jake, and myself. So who knows? Who knows what that means? I guess it's good in the sense of, you might have more time to think, especially if LSU came on strong, but that cuts every single way, right? Like it gives everybody a bit more time. Boomer says, hoping to hear your thoughts on Teddy's comments at some point. So I didn't really get to see a lot of it. I was tagged in it and I watched it, but I didn't really get to digest it. Now, from what I watched, it's interesting because you can't disagree with him from a football standpoint. The guy's football knowledge is incredible, right? Former college football player. Guy knows football. Wilt Fong said Notre Dame regained momentum. Okay, well then there we go, right? If Notre Dame's back in it, then like I didn't even know that, Brandon, and like I just said, it cuts in all directions that he pushed his date back. So whenever we look at this in terms of Teddy's comments, I agree with the premise, but I also, and this is just going to be me splitting hairs, Boomer, because I come from debate. I come from moot court. Like all I've known since high school when I created the debate team at Gainesville High School is debate and how to formulate arguments. I thought his argument was off, right? Because he was dragging the SEC. He's like, oh, outside of Kirby's the longest tenured head coach, him and Stoops. And then outside of that, they do, they're all losing coaches and that's why they're not great. And I was like, okay, but isn't OU on their third coach in the same time frame that you gave all these other SEC schools, from Stoops to Riley to Venables? So that's why I was like, I agree with your overall point, but I think that the way you went about arguing it leaves you so open to so many logical counter arguments that while your point was wrong, your argumentation was I don't want to be. The argumentation just left a lot to be desired, because I was sitting there thinking to myself, and this is on first listen, I was like, okay, I could counter it this way, 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 even though I do agree with you. So yeah, I agreed with the overall point, but I just thought that some of the points of the argumentation, I was like, I wouldn't have done that, because you left yourself open to so many counter arguments in terms of like, oh, well, they're no good because they've had 3 coaches in the last 10 years. It's like, okay, well, Oklahoma's on their 3rd coach, so that's not a good argument right there. Oh, they're no good because only Bama and Georgia run the conference. Okay, like I do agree with you. It has been top heavy, but how many SEC schools have won it since 2000? Auburn, Florida, Bama, Georgia, LSU. Right? LSU. And so like I said, I agreed with his overall point, but I think that there was a much better way to make the argument that would have left you not as susceptible to counter arguments. So it's interesting, but I do very much well agree that OU is being disrespected. I've always said that. Oh no, Coach Sean. Oh no. Benji says, just find it funny how they are now David versus Goliath. All of a sudden, plenty of people have said they are a player for the college football championship this year. Like they are getting pressed from. Well, we talked about that they're getting pressed from recruiting, Benji. This is what I mean when I say sometimes people are purposefully obtuse. We did say that they're recruiting well and getting pressed from that. But if you look on the national stage, you even said it yourself. They're being predicted as 4th in the SEC, right? Like we just think that they're a bit above that. Nobody said they're number 1, but you're just trying to be purposefully obtuse so it's a zero-sum game with you, right? Like if we're saying that, oh, well, we think they're better than first, you take that as, oh, well, they got to be number 1. And it's a victim mindset, but that's not what we're saying at all.
Let me say this, Ty. Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just think that there's a notion that you have in your head, and that's like you're not going to move off of that. No, we didn't say it was disrespectful. We just said that whenever you look, Coach Sean said that more people are getting picked to win the SEC than any time before. Fact.
It's a fact.
And we disagree with them being 4th. Fact. Once again, you're kind of proving my point of you have it in your head that things are one way, and if we disagree with you, all of a sudden it's David versus Goliath, which is, like I said, purposefully obtuse. And I don't know that it's meant like, well, I think whenever you look, Benji, we were there whenever Sabin retired, and people said Bama is done. We were there.
Everybody, yeah.
Like that was something that was said. When we said disrespectful, that's what we're referring to, is people saying Bama's done. And then Benji, I'll say it like this. I did recruiting videos saying Bama got a win for this kid. I had Texas fans coming on the video going, bookmark this so that when they start losing kids, I can come back and laugh. And it's like, how bored do you have to be in life to like say these things? Right? Or they're like, KD can't recruit. Well, those are disrespectful statements. So yes, there has been disrespectful statements. That's what he was referring to as disrespectful. Like thinking that other teams can win the SEC, that's not disrespectful. We just take that as doubt. Right. People say Bama was dead in April too. Yes, they did actually, Ben.
They still saying it. They still like, well, what would you have to see without Coach Sabin? They still saying it.
Ben, I get it. Like, but whenever I'm the one posting videos and getting the comments, I think I could probably tell you a bit more aptly than. It's
a whole fact. And I'll say this.
I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you, right? Like I make the content, I put it out, I get the comments.
It's a fact.
I think I can tell you what was said.
And I'll tell you this.
Disrespectful, but that's the truth.
He was saying that it shouldn't take all that to get a recruit. Man, let me tell you something. And I text this guy and asked, could I use his name? So my little nephew, Quinte, play in Chester, Virginia right now with a recruit that was going to go to Auburn. I can tell you that right now from his father. The kid is a cornerback. He's a 4-star kid. He was going to Auburn. It was locked and loaded. Everything was signed and delivered. All the kid asked for was when you have your little what is it when they put the kid's face on the big screen in the field? I want you, do mine. I missed the visit where y'all done that. Can you give me that so I can record it and post it on my IG? Auburn was like, well, blah, blah, blah. In other words, they didn't do it. Guess what the kid did? The very next day, he flipped and committed to Georgia because guess what Georgia did? They went and paid the money for the graphic, got the kid up there. They done it the same damn day. So if you don't think that little stuff, it shouldn't take all that. The hell it don't. The hell it don't. You can't tell me I've recruited these kids. If you don't think little stuff like that matters, then you need to stay on the couch and continue just to watch because you don't have a clue what you're talking about.
Well,
The kid now just committed to Auburn, I think last week. He's a cornerback. That's all I'll say.
in fairness,
From Virginia.
I think Ben's comment wasn't about that. It was about someone said that they needed bulletin board material. It was an Oklahoma fan that said they needed bulletin board material, and he said it shouldn't take all that.
No, this wasn't to Ben. This was to somebody else that was saying.
Oh, okay.
No, it wasn't Ben. I'm telling them that it does. Those little things like that the average fan don't think make a difference. I'm here to tell you personally, they do. This kid was going to Auburn. Auburn was BSing with putting his face on the thing because he wanted to post it and show his family how it looked. Auburn didn't do it. Well, guess who did do it? Georgia did do it, and the kid now just went to Georgia, committed. Boom.
Yeah, recruiting is different. Fact. You got to adapt to it, no doubt about it.
You got to adapt to it. That's a fact.
That's the only. About 5 till talking about Bama's corner room. That's the only kind of question I have. 5 till. I think that the talent is extraordinary in there, right? You got 3 5-star true freshmen, but it's just the inexperience. Like that's the only area on the team where I'm like they're really talented, but they haven't gelled together. They haven't had that opportunity, so that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Mo Linguist being back there, and then you have Coach Hitchler, who I'm big on, Coach Hitchler. But gentlemen, yeah, shout out to Brinsky.
Broski right there. Love Brinsky.
But Benji, it's all like one thing I do love about Ben is that he's going to push back. And I love debate. I love contention. And Ben always does it in a respectful manner. And so like that's what we're here for, right? Is like if you're going to debate and you do so in a respectful manner, that's where we will have the debates. We will have the conversations. And Ben, I very much will do appreciate you. Yes, sir.
We need to get Ben and my brother Adam Lamparillo in the same chat. That'll be wonderful. Adam is crazy, man. I love Adam to death, man. He be on us, bro. You know what I mean? But he do it in a respectful way. That's why I got so much love for him.
Yeah, and that's why, Ben, I will point out your comments because you do push back. You do disagree with what we say, but like you do so in a respectful way that is conversation conducive to an actual end goal, right? And that's what this is all about. But Coach Sean, as we're getting out of here, let the people know where they can find all your great content.
If you guys want to tap in with me, I hadn't put nothing up in it like a week, man. Been really, really, really busy, but I'm gonna put some things up today and really get deep into some stuff. Put a couple of belts to some asses. If you're not prepared for that, you might not want to come. But it's respectful and it's with taste. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Thank you first and foremost to my brother Ty Hayes, who always do a great job, man. I always do a great job. Much love to the content he puts out there. It's always fair, man. You got to give this man his credit. It's just due. Shout out to Coach Jay. Shout out to Coach Jake Merrill. Shout out to Coach Smook and the AAA Network. Shout out to Jason, Hall of Fame Sports. Shout out to Brinsky and Sharpshooters. Shout out to Jay that was on today. Shout out to RJ, Preston. Shout out to all the content creators who do an absolute outstanding job putting out good content, right? The season's starting, so you guys really need to stay attached to us. Business is gonna pick up very soon. But you can find me at It's Just My Humble Opinion, JMHO Sports Talk on Twitter and YouTube, JMHO Sports Talk.
That'll do it for us for now. And then we'll see y'all on Monday, on the Monday Roundtable panel. Until then, as always, let me introduce you to the third member of the panel, the Spinning Wheel of Doom. And it spooms.